Hello and welcome back to another Crank Miniatures video, and today we'll be assembling the monitor for the PHR. My goal is to assemble and paint and also magnetize the miniature, so I've got all three options for play. So we'll be starting with part 3 here, which is the hull, and then we'll also take part 4, 5 and 6 and 7, and the goal is to paint all of these, magnetize them up and be able to swap between all three variants, just so I've got a bit of flexibility in list building. So I'm going to clip these out and undercoat them, and let's get to it. And we're back. So now the next step I'd like to take, now that the undercoat is basically dry, there's still a couple of patches that are a bit wet, and one of the issues with brush undercoating is, of course, if you mess up and touch it while it's still drying, you'll make a bit of a mess there, but I think the sponging step will cover that up nicely. But the next thing that I would like to do is prep these for magnetization. So all of these ships just have a separate part that will pop in. Now that I've brush undercoated it, the fit is a little bit rough, so there's a very small gap there, but I think it'll hold together fairly well. And the reason I wanted to do this after undercoating is so that I don't have paint over the magnets. I figured that'd be a bit easier. So first thing I'm going to do is just right in the middle here, drill a small magnet hole. Now I'll be using 1mm by 1mm magnets for this. So let's make a good dent first. I'll use the scalpel here to make a notch that the drill bit will be able to bite into. And it does take a little bit to get it started. The drill bit is wandering around a bit, but before long we'll get a neat little hole there. Alright, so now we're starting to get somewhere. I had ended up having to use a smaller than 1mm drill bit to drill a pilot hole, and then about a 1.5mm drill bit above it. It didn't work well. These drill bits clearly are not for plastic, but it's what I've got. So I'm going to get some better drill bits before I continue on with this. But so far I've got one magnet mounted there in the hull, and I've drilled a hole here for the second one. So to make sure I've got everything lined up correctly, I'm going to take one magnet and apply it onto there. So we know that I'm going to want to insert it that direction. So to make sure I get it correctly, I'm going to put a little blob of paint on there, because I'm going to need to take this magnet out so that I can fit it into the other part. So let's put a little blob of red paint, so I know that's the side that goes into the other part. And that's probably more of a blob than I really needed to put. You can see it's domed up on there, but that'll be fine. So let's see, can I gently slide this off onto the scalpel? I can. Perfect. So we know that red side is what's going to be going into this gun part here. Now the hole is slightly deeper than it needs to be, and certainly a bit wider than it needs to be. But a little bit of super glue in there. And can we get that gently into place? Looks like we can. Get this extra plastic off. So let's let that set up for a little bit and then test fit. And we have a magnetized piece. There we go. So I'll continue on with the other two pieces to go, and I'll be back shortly. now that all those parts have been magnetized, so maybe it's not the best of jobs in the world, but they do hold in place. This part particularly didn't go on very well. You can see there's a gap visible through the edge there, but it holds. Nothing to complain about really. So let's get started with painting. So this component here is pretty much just going to be metallic colors. That's easy. But for the hull, the tailpiece here, and these guns, I'm going to build up the cream colored coat the same way I did on the previous Echo and Harpo crates. So first up, we'll get started with Two Thin Coats Barbarian Brawn as our warm brown. Like I said in the last video, brands don't matter. Pick a paint that you like the consistency of, the way it applies, the bottle. I don't particularly like the Two Thin Coats bottle, unfortunately, but I like the paint. I like the way it goes on. Vallejo bottles are great. It's a slightly runnier mix, which is fine too. Great for display painters. But me, I just get whatever paints I want. And I want a nice warm brown to start as the base coat. And just as last time, I've got a moistened makeup sponge here. Very, very lightly dampened, just to stop the paint drying out when it touches the sponge. And we're going to get a little bit of paint on the sponge, then work it into the surface so it's somewhat dry, like so, and then we can start applying that to the whole pieces. And even that's maybe a bit more heavier than I wanted, but as the base color it's fine. Now there's definitely going to be some overspill here. We're going to go over into parts that we do not want to be the hull color, which is fine. We'll clean those up in a later step. But for now, we're just getting started, establishing some base colors, and we'll move on from there. Okay, so with a nice warm brown in place, next step is to start the mid color, and for that we're going to go with Vallejo Dark Sand as a dark cream color, tending towards the yellow a little bit. I don't have a dark proper cream, but this will work fantastically, I think, and we'll add a bit of warmth to the final highlights. So I've just used the same sponge. I haven't bothered getting a clean sponge, and worked some paint into it there. It'll mix a bit. Perfectly fine, not an issue. And again, maybe that's a bit more than I really needed on there. But we're adding some quick texture and a quick highlight. All right, now I'm going to try and remove a bit more of that brown here on the paper towel, because we're going to jump up to what's going to be the last highlight. And in the last video I did use Vallejo Pale Sand for that, but I think in this one I'm going to try Elfic Flesh, just to try and get a bit more of contrast in the final coat. Elfic Flesh is a little bit paler. Definitely a bit colder, which something I'm concerned about, but we'll see how well that goes together in the end. And for this last one, I'm just going to try to hit the most highest points. And try and leave some color in the deeper parts. So not pressing too heavily, and I've tried to really clean out the sponge a good deal for this one. Just get a little bit more in there. And I don't want to leave too much texture behind, but some is not a bad thing, I think. The elfic flesh, ultimately, I'm not entirely sure about that. It has gone a bit more pale and washed out than I would have liked. But comparing it to one of the ships from last time, I think it's close. And frankly, I could have added a bit more of the highlight color. So we're in the right ballpark at least. So next thing to do, let's clean up the overpainting. So by that I mean all the sections that weren't supposed to be this hull color. I'm going to cover those up with a dark gray. Let's see, what have I got here? Death Reaper from Two Thin Coats is a very dark gray, almost a black, but not quite black, and that'll clean up those recesses just nicely. So let's get to it. Alright, now next up will be the metallics. So for that I'll be using plate armor and then applying a very mild wash over the top of it, I think, just to break things up a little bit. So I'll try and put that on fairly dry. I actually don't want it flowing onto all the recesses, so if I can sort of do an overbrushing effect, that'd be really ideal. But we'll see what we get, and we can always tidy things up with a wash at a later time. Okay, and that's looking all right. And just to show a little bit better what I'm doing, so I'm just getting a bit of paint on the brush, drying it off on the paper there, and then brushing over. It's really not ideal for the brushes, it will do damage to them, but what are brushes for? They're for painting. So consumables. And I noticed at the front of the ship here, there's these little pieces that could be some kind of sensors. So let's give them a splash of color as well. And for that, let's go for a nice red, I think. Because this is a monitor ship after all, so I guess it needs some sort of lens system to monitor things with. And let's wrap it up now. So here we have the Castor, the Pollux, and the Philonoe. All in all, it was good fun. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye for now.